Brady's the best of all time.
Tom Brady is the greatest football player to ever play.
Tom Brady is the greatest football player in the 97-year history of the NFL.
He's the GOAT.
I put him at the best already.
Best ever.
Well, Tom Brady is the greatest of all time.
75% of Brady is better than 100% of the other quarterbacks.
I do. I think he's the greatest that ever played the game.
And I think he's the greatest that's ever played our sport at that position.
Tom is the best.
Oh, he'll go down as the greatest of all time by the time he gets done playing.
You know, Tom Brady, the GOAT.
Where does he stand for you?
The best.
No question, right?
No doubt.
The Patriots have become the iconic franchise of this century, known for an unparalleled dynasty and pure excellence. Their record-breaking tactics centered around a coach and quarterback with the most Super Bowl wins at their respective positions. All the success they've had in this dominant era makes it easy to forget what this franchise was before the 2000s. More specifically, when the most important position wasn't helmed by Tom Brady. Let's dive into the Patriots' rocky past through the numerous starting quarterbacks that came before TB12. Before 20-plus point comebacks and various last-minute championship drives, the Patriots were always known to let down through inadequacy and eventual heartbreaks. The first quarterback in Boston Patriots franchise history started his career with a humble beginning. Butch Songin was actually coaching high school football when not taking the field for the American Football League's inaugural season. Songin originally played QB at Boston College, then played for an earlier pro football league, Canadian football, and even pro hockey, before playing in the first ever AFL game. At the age of 36, he had the second best passer rating in the league as he threw for 22 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. But after battling a neck injury, Songin was benched for Tom Green for the final 2 games. And Green didn't quite share the same success, throwing for 1 touchdown and 6 picks as the team finished with a 5-9 record. Now the Patriots were stuck in 1961 with an aging quarterback coming back from an injury, and were looking for a replacement. The Oakland Raiders traded them Babe Parilli, who split the job with Songin that season. The next year, Parilli had to battle for the job with Tom Usick. Parilli ended up winning the job and became the Pats' first franchise quarterback, whereas Usick continued to punt and be a Swiss Army knife on offense. Parilli led the team to the 1963 AFL Championship game, but they got blown out by the Chargers. After that, the Patriots struggled to find consistent success through the rest of the 60s. Although Parilli played for the team until 1967, and amassed over 22,000 yards in his 15-year pro career. He was named to the Patriots All-60s team and was one of the elite quarterbacks of that decade. Also in 1965, Eddie Wilson made 1 start, throwing for 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions. That's all we'll hear from Eddie. By the time Parilli was wearing down in age and his production was decreasing, Don Troll made 3 starts, and although he's in the College Football Hall of Fame, Troll had a dreadfully short career in Boston. In 1968, Parilli was gone, and the birth of one of the worst quarterback battles in pro football history began. Mike Tolliver threw 4 touchdowns and 15 interceptions that season, while Tom Sherman went 1-6, throwing 12 touchdowns and 16 interceptions. Then somehow Tolliver became an AFL All-Star the very next year, but the Patriots were still horrible. In 1970, after leading the Vikings to a Super Bowl, Joe Kapp signed with the Pats. But his luck must have run out during that Super Bowl loss because his career was about to hit rock bottom. Kapp's touchdown to interception tally was an appalling 3-17. And that was the end of his career. So with the number 1 pick in the 1971 draft, the Patriots were in line to select a quarterback who at the time was being called the best pro prospect ever. After winning the Heisman Trophy at Stanford, Jim Plunkett made his way to New England. He started all 14 games that year, taking the team to 6-8, which was their best record since 1966. Although showing some promise as a rookie, Plunkett struggled mightily the next year behind a weak offensive line. Things started to get better in 1974, but injuries caused Plunkett to never live up to his potential. After a 1-4 start in 1975, head coach Chuck Fairbanks benched Plunkett and eventually sent him to the 49ers. Ultimately, he would win 2 Super Bowls with the Raiders, along with a Super Bowl MVP. Once Plunkett was benched, 2 quarterbacks were meant to compete for the starting job. One of them was Neil Graff, who played just 2 subpar games. He was later unprotected in the 1976 expansion draft and sent to the Seahawks. The other player? Well, he would go on to become Mr. Patriot before Tom Brady was even born. Steve Grogan didn't have the accuracy or accolades that Brady has, but he was absolutely solid and played for the team for 16 seasons. From 76 through 79, he started every game for the team. After that, his career was marred with injuries and starting quarterback controversies. Grogan had a suitable passing game to go along with a great grittiness to rush. His 12 rushing touchdowns in 1976 stood as the record for a quarterback until none other than Cam Newton broke it in 2011. Most importantly for Grogan, though, the team started to win more, despite a lack of playoff victories. 1980 sparked the first year in which Grogan shared the starting duties. Matt Cavanaugh hopped in and played particularly well, going 3-1 and throwing for 9 touchdowns. The next year, however, was a disaster for both Cavanaugh and Grogan. Tom Owen even got a start with the poor play and injuries afflicting the other two, but he wasn't any good either. So after wanting more durability and productivity at the position, the Patriots wanted to draft a quarterback once again. And what better draft than 1983, which featured Hall of Fame quarterbacks John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Dan Marino. With the 15th pick, the Patriots opted for Tony Eason, with Marino still on the board. Eason and Grogan were set to battle for the starting spot for years to come in an unusually long position battle. Eason had a great season in 1984, but the next year he was benched due to injury and lackluster play. Grogan then started to get things going, only to be hurt weeks later. Next thing you know, the Patriots finished with an 11-5 record, and Eason, along with a turnover machine defense, win 3 straight playoff games on the road, advancing them to the Super Bowl against the Bears. Coming off perhaps the greatest win in franchise history, didn't help the Patriots one bit against the '85 Bears' famous defense. Eason's stat line for the game is ugly, going 0 for 6 and losing a fumble. Grogan replaced him and threw for 177 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. The Bears blew them out 46-10 in one of the biggest Super Bowl thrashings the league has ever seen. After another playoff season in 1986, the Patriots were still stuck in an era of quarterback complications. Bob Blyer was a replacement player during the '87 strike. He started 2 games that season, which was his whole career. His completion percentage was 35.9%. He threw 1 touchdown and had 3 turnovers. Doug Flutie, the Boston College hero, was traded to the Patriots at the start of the year and played 1 game. And finally, after Grogan and Eason, Tom Ramsey was the 5th starting quarterback that year after all the injuries. The Patriots finished 8-7 in a strike year where most teams struggled to find any consistency. Then in 1988, they started 4 quarterbacks with below average years from all of Flutie, Grogan, Eason, and Ramsey. After that, Ramsey went to the Colts. In 89, the team went 5-11 with a ridiculous amount of injuries once again. Newcomer Mark Wilson was one of 4 quarterbacks to start a game that season. After that year, Eason went to the Jets, and Flutie moved to Canadian football before returning to the NFL and eventually becoming Brady's backup in 2005. 1990 was Grogan's final year in his 16-year career. He would later be inducted into the Patriots Hall of Fame. With a new coach and problems in management, the Pats finished 1-15. Rookie Tommy Hodson went 0-6 that year. In 1991, Hugh Millen signed with the Patriots and started more games that season than Hodson, who was the only other starter that year. This was the first time in 5 years that they had only 2 QBs starting. Millen had an up and down season. His stats were pretty terrible, but at least he led the team to some wins. The next season, the Patriots went 2-14. Millen suffered an injury, opening up the position for Hodson, who was ultimately benched for young Scott Zolak. He got the team's only 2 wins that year, but he hurt his ankle and Jeff Carlson came in and played dreadfully. That would be the last year for Millen and Hodson with the Pats, as things started to take a turn toward a new era when the Patriots hired coaching legend Bill Parcells. And once again, we're lined up to take a talented quarterback with the first overall pick in the draft. After a record-setting career at Washington State, the Patriots got their guy with Drew Bledsoe in the '93 draft. But after losing their first 4 games, Bledsoe was injured in Week 5. Scott Secules took over for 4 games, threw 9 picks, got injured, and Bledsoe took over again. The future Pro Bowler would go on to start almost every game until 2001. In 1996, Bledsoe had established himself as an elite quarterback, throwing for over 4,000 yards and 27 touchdowns in his second Pro Bowl season. The team went 11-5 and all the way to its second Super Bowl in franchise history, but turnovers killed the Patriots, and they ended up losing the game 35-21. Still, Bledsoe ended up making the Pro Bowl again the next year. In 1998, the Patriots made the playoffs for the 3rd straight year, despite Bledsoe missing the final games. Zolak started in his place, and in the playoffs, the offense struggled to get going in a losing effort against the Jaguars. Bledsoe would return the next year, but never quite matched his level of play prior to that injury. In 2001, the Patriots believed they had their franchise quarterback, which they absolutely did. They gave Bledsoe a 10-year, $103 million contract. Then during the second game of that season, Mo Lewis delivered the hit that would change the football world forever. In came pick 199 of the 2000 NFL Draft, who began his career 4th on the depth chart. Several weeks later, the Pro Bowler expected his job back, but Bill Belichick had different ideas. Looking back with a record 6 Super Bowl wins later, I think it's fair to say the right decision was made.